Welcome, everybody, to Boston 9/11 Truth. Today is June 18th, 2026. And today we have Fran Shure from Colorado, a 9/11 Truth. And the topic today will be bullying within the 9/11 Truth movement. And hopefully we can make some real progress on identifying and avoiding and coping with bullying and harassment. But before we begin, I would like to go over quickly our guidance, Boston 9/11 guidelines. Um, so during Fran's presentation, everyone is to be muted, and we will follow up after her presentation with a Q&A, and people will be called upon one at a time by raising their electronic hand. If you can't figure out how to raise your electronic hand, put it in the chat. I may not see you wave, so please put it in the chat. I will try and be attentive as to who comes up first with questions. When a person has a question, please limit your question to two, no more than 3 minutes, so that we can give everybody a chance. And do please be respectful of all the other participants and the guest speakers. As always in our Boston 9/11 Truth, there will be no shouting allowed. And for this particular Zoom meeting, we will not include any personal names in your comments. The purpose, again, is to identify the tactics of bullying and harassment and to deal with them, not to purge or talk about your experiences with any individuals. Okay? So let's be cognizant of that. Before I introduce Fran, I just want to also say that the expressions of our guest speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Boston 9/11 Truth. So, 9/11 Truth is a grassroots movement that works to educate the public on 9/11, the lies that we were told about 9/11. And, as such, it's as a grassroots organization, we hold a variety of opinions as individuals, and all those opinions are welcome. So, without further ado, we just had a little tornado watch here in where I am in Worcester, so I'm a little ill prepared right now. Let me bring up Fran's introduction so that I can read that for our, let's see. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Very ill prepared. I shall find it in a moment. Here we go. Okay. So the title again is a discussion about bullying behavior and difficult behavior. And this is by my invitation to Fran to discuss this. We will have a discussion about bullying behavior and difficult behavior, especially as it applies to activist organizations. Fran will share what she has learned from her reading on this subject, along with her own personal experiences. Hopes for accomplishment is for us to become more aware of what actual bullying behavior looks like and how we can deal with it. This is so we can prevent our groups from becoming dysfunctional and compromising our mission. After the presentation on what she has learned, the attendees will be invited to participate in a Q&A. Sorry, interrupted a little bit there. The pertinent questions will be presented tonight will be what is bullying behavior versus what is difficult behavior? Why do some people develop bullying behavior? What can we do to prevent bullies? Even just difficult people from causing dysfunction in our activist organizations. So again, the rule for sharing, except for examples of politicians and other public figures, there will be a strict rule of not identifying in any way any individual about whom we are speaking. This rule is to prevent further infighting, causing group dysfunction, by keeping our conversation dispassionate and objective. So Fran Shure is retired from being a psychological therapist specializing in early trauma. She is one of the co-founders of Colorado 9/11 Truth and is currently governing on the governing board of that group. She was featured as one of the group of psychological professionals who contributed to the video 9/11 explosive evidence, experts speak out. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, and help produce the video, The Demolition of Truth-Psychologists Examine 9/11. So that was on Colorado Public Television. Fran is the subject of an article in a local Denver newspaper titled A Spiritual Issue Not to Be Silent About 9/11. She is also the author of a letter published in the Journal of 9/11 Studies titled When Psychologists Torture Our Heads Spin. Both of these articles are found at 911speakout.org. Fran is notably the author of the essays series, Why Do Good People Become Silent or Worse About 9/11, in which she explores the reasons 9/11 truth is such a taboo topic, particularly to many Americans. The updated version of this series can be found at ic911.org under the Books and Series tab. Welcome, Fran. Take it away. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Susan. I want to add to that introduction that when Susan asked both Marty Hopper and me to give a talk on bullying, neither one of us wanted to do it, because we were really concerned that it could create more divisiveness in our movement, but I began to think about it and I thought, well, it doesn't have to do that. We all need to learn more about what bullying behavior looks like, or just difficult people, and what do we do about that? How can we empower ourselves when we encounter bullying or difficult behavior? So that's what this is really all about. It's how do we empower ourselves, to deal with this issue. Marty, by the way, I have to say this, Marty, I didn't know this. Marty and I talked about my talk, and I didn't realize that she used to give this kind of information as a professional for years. So I'm sure she'll have some things to say in the Q&A to add to examples and tell us some of her thoughts about this. So I want to say I'm very happy to be able to present the evidence I found. I had to do a fair amount of reading because I really wasn't up to speed on this whole issue myself. So I'm hoping, one of my hopes, it'll be a learning journey for all of us, including me. I learn with you. And my talk's going to be about 40 minutes, and I'm going to have to read from my notes so that I stay on track and don't get off track here and try to keep the time down. And I will repeat the questions that I'm going to attempt to answer are number one, what is bullying behavior versus what is difficult behavior? Number two, why do some people develop bullying behavior? And number three, how can we prevent bullies or even just difficult behavior from causing dysfunction in our activist organizations? So, for the first question, I'll talk about, excuse me, I'll talk about people who have difficult behavior first. I just want to get that out of the way. So, people can be, and please, Susan, stop me if there's something you need to stop me for to make some clarifications. But people can be difficult for various reasons. And as I thought about this, I thought, well, all of us can be difficult at times, you know. And for example, there's some of us who just may be extreme extroverts, and we just can't help ourselves from chiming in into a conversation more than other people. Other people can be difficult because they have some narcissistic tendencies and they want to be sure their voices are heard a lot. They can be hungry for attention. They don't seem to have an instinct to know when it's time to step back and let others speak, and 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 they may see themselves as superior or as heroes, and they can tend to dominate conversations. Usually, these people just need some reminders by a facilitator of the group to step back and give others a chance to step forward to express their views. Other people who can be difficult actually have personality disorders, such as borderline personality disorder. And I'll give an example of how I was bullied by such a person in this talk. Um, the people with this particular disorder, I have a friend with it, I'm very aware of it, and they can be very inconsistent in how they relate to us. One week they may be praising us, and another week they may be trying to shame us. So that's difficult behavior for sure. But all of us can be difficult when we are triggered into negative emotions. So, what do I mean by triggered? So, I've thought of three reasons of how we can become triggered into negative emotions. We may be triggered due to a person's behavior, but this behavior reminds us of a difficult parent or sibling from our childhood. For example, if as a child our father never listened to us and often interrupted us, we can become hurt and angry if a person in the present displays that same behavior. So, what is happening here is the father is transferred to the person who is interrupting us. And this is in psychological parlance, this is called transference. So another way we can be triggered into anger, fear, hurt, confusion is when we have trauma. And the present situation reminds us of that trauma. For example, if we were abandoned by our mother or our father at an early age, then the perception of abandonment in the present can trigger all the emotions we may have had from that early trauma. This can happen, by the way, whether we are consciously aware of that trauma or not. Mm. A third way we can be triggered into negative emotional reactions is when we are invested in a worldview that we identify with, and someone comes along and inconveniently challenges our worldview. Our negative reaction is a result, we all know now, of cognitive dissonance. We've talked about this a lot in this movement. A good example is the anger we get from others when we're telling them about 9/11 evidence that shows that 9/11 was a false flag operation. That's a really good example. People, we've probably all of us have experienced anger from people who don't want to hear this information. But what about the anger we may feel if someone believes differently than we do about what happened on 9/11? For example, did Muslims actually hijack those planes? Was it really explosives that brought down the Twin Towers? There are so many beliefs we have in this movement, and we become identified with those beliefs, and we don't like them to be challenged. All of us have experienced being triggered into negative emotions when our worldview is challenged, but if we want to grow, we always need to take responsibility for our emotional reactions and our subsequent behaviors. I often like to say, if you have 10 different people experiencing one specific event, you will have 10 different reactions to that event. And what I'm trying to illustrate when I say this is that we need to take responsibility for our own emotions. And by doing this, by taking responsibility, we become introspective, we look at our emotions, we try to figure out where they're coming from, and in that way we can grow. So now that's covered. I've covered actually difficult behavior here, and including how we can become difficult at times. So what is actual bullying? How does it differ from difficult behavior? Well, first of all, I want to give a definition of bullying behavior to help us distinguish. It's repetitive. Bullying behavior is repetitive. It's intended to intimidate, to control, or to damage others. So we may come back to that definition because I think it's very important to realize that's what actual bullying behavior is. We find it in schools, at all levels in schools. We find it in the workplace. We find it in groups of friends and in activist groups. So bullying has many forms. It can be overt or it can be very subtle. It can be physical. It can be verbal. It can be social and emotional. And now, of course, we have cyberbullying. I'm sure most of us have experienced that. I have a name for cyberbullying, and it's called the bravery of being out of range. Since I love the band Pink Floyd, that's one of Roger Waters' songs, The Bravery of Being Out of Range. So I thought it fits perfectly for people who bully on the internet. So people will, when they feel hidden behind their computer or their phone screens, they are emboldened to be harsh or cruel in ways that they would not otherwise indulge in. It's very sad to watch that. So as I did my research on bullying, I learned that while there are individuals who have a tendency to bully others, there is another type of bullying behavior which is called mobbing. Mobbing is when a group of people bully a target. Mobbing can be experienced in the workplace, in corporate America. It can be experienced in school settings or in activist groups, actually. It happens when several people gang up on an individual. Now, there was some research I read when I was reading about this that surprised me. This research shows that the targets of mobbing are usually those who challenge the status quo. According to this research, the victims are usually competent, well-educated, and outspoken. In the corporate world, targets are more likely to be women, ages 32 to 55, or members of a minority, or anyone who appears different. And another study it was shown that 79.3 million Americans were affected by workplace bullying in 2021. Another study showed that 30% of workers have directly dealt with bullying at the office, and a whopping 43.2% dealt with bullying while working remotely. That was just amazing to me to hear that. Now, in activist settings, usually the target of bullying will drop out of the group or at least back off and not contribute as much as he or she would like. In schools, especially in schools, this bullying or mobbing or cyberbullying can result in the student committing suicide. So the consequences of bullying can be very serious. I want to tell you about some forms of bullying that bullying can take, many of which overlap. Bullying can take the form of gossip and rumors. This can include what's called whisper campaigns. These are common in politics, in which damaging rumors or innuendo are spread about a candidate to manufacture a scandal. But whisper campaigns also occur in activist groups and in the workplace. I'll give you an example of an activist group where this takes place. In 2000, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up here. I'm going to give you an example of a political example in the 2000 Republican primary, where there was an attack on John McCain, who falsely implied that he had fathered a Black child out of wedlock. The rumor targeted voters in South Carolina through push polls, asking if they would be less likely to vote for McCain if they knew this quote unquote fact. Okay. The whisper campaign neglected to say that his daughter, Bridget, was adopted from Bangladesh. So what are push polls? I had to look that up. I didn't know. Push polls are actually marketing techniques to convince people of something negative about a candidate. And they imply things about that candidate to get people not to vote for that candidate. Then also bullying can take form as leadership aggression. Often a group leader or a boss, a teacher or a parent will play an active role in isolating and targeting the victim. And that's why I'm saying in this talk too, not only can we name politicians, if we have some grudge against a politician, we think they're a bully, I think they're fair game. I also think if we've been bullied by a parent or sibling, they're fair game as well, because I want people to share their own experiences of bullying. That's what I'm hoping will happen in the Q&A, that we all share our own experiences of bullying, and maybe we've bullied sometimes and we feel bad about it, or maybe we've seen people bullied and we stepped up to the plate and we did something about it, or we didn't step up to the plate, and how do we feel about that? Bullying can also take the form of verbal aggression. This may take the form of sarcasm, passive-aggressive insults, hostile tones of voice, repeated interruptions, accusations, name-calling, and labeling, just to name a few. I want to give an example of this is if you all watched the Senate hearings of RFK Jr., when he was being confirmed as HHS secretary, we saw the most pathetic examples of hostility and accusations toward him that I think I've ever seen in my life. And of course, we know well the term conspiracy theorist. That's a label that applies to us. Another form that bullying can take is groupthink framing. This is actually a term I made up by observing the dynamics I've seen in more than one activist group I've been involved with. It's usually um, perpetrated by one or a few individuals who verbally manipulate others to convince them that they are really not a part of this group if they believe differently from what this person believes. It is intense peer pressure to intimidate others to believe certain narratives or else face ostracism. I find this groupthink framing to be a type of psychological violence as it is intended to create fear in others so that they conform or else be banished. All of us have a deep human need to belong. So this is quite a powerful bullying technique. One example I have for that is in 1999 and in the early 2000s, I was involved with the anti-globalization movement. We were trying to get people to be aware of sweatshops and how the things we buy in our department stores were made by slave labor, basically. Then a carrot, and this was a national, in fact, an international movement. A charismatic couple suddenly moved to Denver and influenced all the young, naive members of our group, saying, "Now there are the true revolutionaries, and then there are those who are just reformers," implying, as they say that if you're a part of this group, you need to be a true revolutionary and not just a reformer. So and basically, this is a very divisive tactic. And indeed, it divided that group very, very much. And it divided it so much, and they convinced these young, naive people to believe and do things that wound up getting some of these people in jail. It was really a very big lesson for me to watch that dynamic. So the results of this manipulation into groupthink was absolutely disastrous for our group.
Mm.
Here's another example. Uh, very early, as I started questioning 9/11, a very liberal friend said to me, "Well, if you believe 9/11 was a false flag operation, then you support Alex Jones." Now, this was coming from a person who is very, very liberal, and I identified at the time as a progressive. So it was to imply that I better stop my research into 9/11, or I was to be called a right-wing nut, you know.
Mm.
And then COVID came along, and when I was emailing people to be careful with the vaccines, to wait and see what the data shows about them, don't just go get those vaccines. Well, a friend of mine emailed me and said, "Take me off your list, you right-wing nut." You know?
Wow.
So it was actually funny, you know.
Okay.
So another example of groupthink framing is be aware that when anyone says to you, "Everyone knows," and it is said in a way that you are given the message that to be part of this group, you have to believe a certain way. If you hear these words, then you know you are being manipulated to believe a certain narrative. This is very related to the propaganda technique of the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is a propaganda technique where the propaganda says, "Jump on the bandwagon, be part of the majority. Otherwise, you're a part of the minority." So groupthink framing is divisive, it's toxic, and it discourages independent and critical thinking.
Mm.
So how do we converse with each other so that we create open dialogue and do not pathologize or demonize others for having a different opinion? I consider it extremely important to learn how to discuss controversial issues constructively, whether it be 9/11 or COVID or other controversial subjects, how do we maintain an open, constructive dialogue? And this is a question I hope we will discuss and address in the Q&A. There's another form of bullying called triangulation. This is a manipulation tactic in which one person involves a third party in a conflict or in a relationship to create division, to gain control, and to avoid direct communication. It's a dysfunctional way to relate as it turns a two-party interaction into a triangle. It can develop into a type of mobbing if the instigator lobbies more people to his or her side in a conflict. It's a divide and conquer strategy, perhaps to get one's way or to win an argument, but ultimately it is to feel more powerful. It is really a strategy to avoid facing one's underlying feelings of powerlessness. Triangulation is done by the instigator so that the target knows they are being talked about negatively. It's done to gang up on that target with an agenda so that the target becomes intimidated, so they become fearful. For example, fearful that their reputation will be tarnished. I have an example of this from my own life. Some of you may know that besides working as a psychotherapist, I also ran a landscaping design and contracting business. One of my employees who was a borderline personality disordered person, by her own admission, by the way, whispered during work to another employee, both of them smiling and giggling and pointing at me and laughing and whispering. And I knew they were talking negatively about me. Of course, that's what they wanted me to do. And what did I feel? Fear. They succeeded. I felt fear. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? Marty is going to give us an example of this in the Q&A. And she's got a great example of this triangulation that I haven't experienced, but she has. So hold on for that. So in summary, triangulation is a power play by people who are not feeling their own personal power. So I'll go to the second question we're going to address in this talk, which is, why do some people develop bullying behaviors? Here is a list of reasons for us to think about. When I first wondered about this, the first thing that came to me was trauma. And indeed, the literature bears this out. The bullies were bullied themselves, probably as a child, by a parent or an older sibling. And they are hurting others due to their own difficult experiences in life. They're externalizing their inward hurt by wanting to hurt others. And this comes the phrase, hurt people hurt people. Because if you haven't been hurt, and need to protect yourself, one way to protect yourself is to become looking very strong and not weak, and putting other people down. If you can put other people down, then you can feel strong and not weak. So bullying is a learned behavior. These people bully others in an attempt to look invincible and to protect themselves by striking first. It's a defense mechanism to avoid being a victim. They are insecure. People who feel insecure may bully others as a means to fit in or make themselves feel superior. For example, in competitive work environments, perhaps someone doesn't feel that they're fit in, so they bully others to be some kind of hero and fit in. Also, being mean to others gets people to treat you with kid gloves, since they don't want to become the next target of the bullying. We may walk on eggshells around these people. They have poor social skills, and they lack the social skills to laugh to resolve conflict, and they have difficulty getting along with others. The literature I read says that bullying is usually a behavior pattern rather than a fixed personality type. Many experts in this field say that bullying behavior can actually change with intervention, with support, accountability, which is very important, and healthier social environments. So here comes the third question. What can we, especially we as activists, do to prevent bullies or even just difficult people from causing dysfunction in our activist organizations? First of all, there's no one way to deal with bullying behavior or with difficult behavior. It always depends on the situation. I'm going to go through some things here that we can do to help the situation and to disallow bullying behavior or even difficult behavior from making our organizations become dysfunctional. Number one on the list is acknowledge the behavior. Call it out. Call it out that that's not acceptable behavior. Name the behavior, but don't name call the person. In other words, you can say, I find your behavior difficult. I find your behavior to be bullying, but don't say you're a bully. So do not bully back. This would only satisfy the bully. Hold them accountable. Be clear about the bullying impact on you or someone else. You can say something like this: the way you are speaking to me is not okay. Be specific. For example, I had to tell a family member of mine that if she continued speaking to me in a condescending way, I would not visit her any longer. And I meant it. If someone is bullying another person, you are a bystander, speak up. Don't be passive. However, don't take on the role of a rescuer. Instead, simply support the person who is being bullied. There's a difference between playing the rescuer and simply supporting the bullied person. Now, this is so important because some of us, especially in the helping professions, see ourselves as rescuers, and that's really not, it's not constructive. If you want to know more about that, I would suggest you look up the Karpman drama triangle. That's spelled with a K, Karpman drama triangle. It's very, very interesting to me. It shows how there's three different roles in some dysfunctional relationships. One is the victim, poor me. Life is against me. I'm always being, put down. The other is the persecutor, the person who's persecuting the victim, and the other is the rescuer. And these roles can change during a dysfunctional relationship. So I highly recommend you look that up. It's really kind of interesting. In another situation, it may be best not to react at all. If someone's bullying you, just simply walk away. This deprives the bully of a sense of control. With cyberbullying, ignore it or call it out, depending on the situation. If we sense that triangulation or mobbing could be starting, do not react. Take a step back, evaluate what is happening, and take action depending on the situation itself. Call out what is going on as calmly as possible and do not participate. If someone is using groupthink framing, call it out. Say something like, hey, wait a minute. You're saying everyone believes this. I'm a part of everyone, and I don't believe what you say everyone believes. So call it out. Encourage productive disagreement as a group norm so that the group does not devolve into groupthink. A good way to do this is to share worldviews. I love that word worldviews. And in the QA, I might share an experience I had with my daughter around COVID, how we actually were able to have a conversation being on opposite sides of that issue by using the word worldview. Um, so let's see, there's something I wanted to say here. Yes, groupthink. If you've read, I can't remember which essay it is I wrote on groupthink, what the number is, but if you've read my essay on groupthink, you will realize that groupthink usually results in very bad decisions being made. In fact, they can sometimes be disastrous decisions. So you can refer to my essay series and look up the groupthink essay to learn about that. So you also do not participate in gossip and rumors, and state to the person gossiping that you don't want to participate, but be kind. Don't be holier than thou. If someone is verbally aggressive, do not condone what this person is doing. If the verbal aggression uh, is passive aggressiveness, then one thing I've done, by the way, is to talk to that person privately. In one situation, I said to this person privately, when you make those comments under your breath about me, I feel hurt. I wonder why you do this. Is there something I am doing on my end to cause you to make those comments? In that situation, it made him aware of what he was doing, and he actually stopped. If it is the group leader who is bullying or being verbally aggressive, this is a much harder situation. In an activist situation, we can privately talk to this leader and help them become aware of their behavior. I recommend private conversations to avoid challenging the leader's ego, or anyone's ego for that matter, as much as possible. Show that you are on his or her side, but just disagree with their behavior. If it is an employment situation, well, we can try to counsel our boss, but we should be ready for reality. We could lose our job. So just to be aware. So another thing we can do is, and this came from Marty, and maybe she'll have more to say about this, plan in advance. If you know you might be in a bullying situation, plan what you would do beforehand. We need to create rules for our groups and consistently uphold these rules. If someone continues to break the rules, you may need to disinvite that person from participating, at least for a time period. And by the way, I just want to congratulate all of you. You all at Boston have done a fantastic job of upholding your guidelines. That's the reason your Zooms are so constructive. Finally, the key thing is not particular answers about what to do, but strive to engage with an open mind and a kind heart. This is how we can do our small part to create a better society. And with that, thank you for listening. And I'm very happy to share this with you. And I'm open for comments and questions. And do you have a time limit, Susan, for these?
No, not particularly. I've been asked to have a time limit, but others have asked me to be unlimited. So, as long
Okay.
as everybody's civil, it's fine. Yeah. But before we begin Q&A, since you mentioned Marty a couple of times, Marty, do you want to
Yeah,
chime
good.
in first?
Sure. Thank you, Susan, and thanks, Fran, for that. Just a couple of things I would add around. One thing I hear all the time around the reasons that people become bullies, and I think I don't know, the armchair psychology. I just hear this everywhere, which is, oh, they're very insecure. That person is very insecure, and that's the reason that they're a bully. And that is not necessarily the case at all, that bullies can be extremely secure, extremely confident, and have perhaps learned this from modeling through their lives. Perhaps they had a parent who was a bully and they saw that, wow, that really works. You know, my mom or dad really got his way throughout life by bullying others. So I think, I mean, it can, if you think of school bullies, often, you know, they're the one, the targets can be the weaker person. And so or the one that doesn't have the skills to respond. So I just want to say, I think just the thing, oh, they're an insecure person, and I wanted to add that I don't agree with that. I think you can look at political figures, leaders. I don't think these are insecure people. I think they can be very feel they are very the dominant person, and they're going to maintain that through these kind of aggressive behaviors toward others. And so that just had to do with kind of the reasons behind as far as dealing with bullies. I very much like what Fran said. To me, it boils down to what we have talked about a lot in the past, which are basic communication skills. I would frame it as assertive communication skills, using I statements, using something I've called a BFI. I just say that to remember it. But you say what the behavior specifically is that the person did. You say the F part, that's the B, the F is the feeling, and the I is the impact. So an example would be, gee, in this uh, Zoom meeting, let's say I was upset with Fran interrupting me. I might say, you know, excuse me, Fran, that is the fifth time you've interrupted me. Okay, it's a very specific behavior. It's not labeling her as rude that's the fifth time you've interrupted me. And when you do that, I feel discounted, and it makes me not want to work with you anymore, would be the impact. So that's an example of, I think, an assertive communication skill that bullies don't like that. You know, people who are aggressive, if they see people who have this kind of assertiveness and who do stand up and point out their behaviors, uh, can back off. Not always, but at least they will tend to respect, hopefully, you know, what that other person's point of view is. And then finally, again, things we've discussed in these things to uh, uh, avoid, you know, yeah, when dealing with someone like is interrupting, name calling, raising our voice, yelling, saying you all always and never, the any kind of personal attacks, use statements versus here's what I saw, how I feel. These are, again, very basic assertive communication skills that I think work in just across the board. It's what we've talked about with dealing with people who, you know, don't like what we're saying about 9/11 truth, and it applies here as well. So that's those are just a couple of things I would add to what Fran said.
Well, thank you,
Thanks,
Marty.
thanks, Marty. And I just want to emphasize, I didn't even know that I was talking to Marty about my talk, and she informed me that she used to give this talk about bullying and you know, in her work for years. So
Well, I did corporate management training for 30
yeah.
years. So it's again, it's these same kind of skills that you can use across all of these settings.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let's open it up to Q&A. Anybody have a question or a comment?
Chris is raising his real hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Chris. Thank you. I didn't see that.
Okay, I've never figured out how to raise my virtual hand, but thank you for recognizing it. Fran and Marty, it's wonderful to see you again, and marvelous insights on both of your parts. Really nailed it as to what the problem is, where it comes from, and how we can respond to it. So thank you so much. Briefly, I wanted to tell you my childhood experience of bullying. That's kind of funny but sad at the same time. I was about 7 years old when our family moved to Virginia from Long Island, New York. First day of school, I came home in third grade, came home all beat up. And my mother said to me, "What happened to you?" And I said, I don't know, Mom. They all say I'm a damn Yankee, and I don't know what a
Oh,
damn Yankee is.
wow.
Fa- Fast forward, 1 year later, the recession comes along. My father loses his job, and we move back up north. And I go to fourth grade in Montclair, New Jersey. First day of school, I come home all beat up again, and
Oh,
my mother says to me, "What happened this time?" And I said, "I don't know, Mama. They all say I talk funny." So and I got to tell you, that was those two experiences of my impact with not fitting into culture really just knocked me for a loop, and I carried that with me for years, and maybe still do have some echoes of it in my consciousness. Now, I'd like to share just quickly an experience of how I blew it with a client because I reacted defensively, which you might say bullying, because I felt assaulted by them, right? And challenged in a way that I felt like I needed to defend myself. A client who I've been working with for a number of years, quite effectively, deeply, intimately, very bonded with him, said to me one day, "I'm very, very upset. I just found out that you're one of those 9/11 kooks. I was looking for some information about you, and I found your involvement in the so-called 9/11 truth movement, and I just can't tell you. I can't imagine how you could be that just confused about what's real." And she felt like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. She felt like I don't even know you anymore. And my reaction to that was to explain why I was right. uh, I sent a long email with lots of links that just sort of showed the sensibleness of my position. And she reacted understandably with, "Well, that's it. We're done working together." If I had simply said, "Oh, person, I'm so sorry you experienced that shock. How terribly upsetting it must have been to feel like you knew me in one way, and then there's this whole other part of me that really shocked you. Tell me a little bit more about how you felt about that, what it was like for you to find that out." If I had reacted that way, there might have been some chance of saving the relationship. And I count it as one of my major professional failures in my career. I bring it up not just because I'm still processing it, but also because defensiveness is the opposite of empathy. Whenever anybody acts crazy with us, our first strategy needs to be, I don't understand. Can you help me? I'm shocked by how you're coming at me with this. Can you help me to understand your point of view, your perspective? If we lead with that, rather than defending our position, there's some chance that we might work things with a person. So thanks for hearing me.
Oh, thank you. Did you want to comment further on that, Fran or Marty?
that's wonderful, really, because I mean, I think when someone is especially aggressively challenging us, we can tend to, we want to protect ourselves, and we want to fight back, you know. But what you have suggested, Chris, is just perfect. It's like, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Can you tell me more? You know, and that opens up conversation instead of people going at each other like this. So thank you, Chris. Wonderful example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
just
I think
want
also we tend to throw more information at someone, like in those
Right,
situations, rather than
right,
listening to the emotion behind it, which is
right.
you're going to get the more openness. So that was a great example, Chris, that you said.
I had a similar story when I was 12. We moved from Tallahassee to Newton, Massachusetts. Huge culture shock. And my brother was 11, and the kids made fun of us because we clearly did not fit in. And they were bullying my brother, and I went to the defense, leaped on their backs and started pummeling them. My brother never forgave me. All right, so Andy has his hand raised. Go ahead, Andy.
Hey there.
Oops, you're breaking
So,
up. There you go.
thank you, Fran. And by the way, Fran, but did you get your degree there too?
I'm sorry?
I said I know you taught as an adjunct professor at Naropa. Did you get your degree there too?
No, no. I got my master's degree at University of Colorado in Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay, cool. Hey, so that wasn't my main question, but I think this is an important topic. Now, when I heard about this, anytime I hear people talk about being bullied and they're adults, I'm like, is someone stealing your lunch money or something like that? But no, I mean, there's a lot of bullying that goes around, and it can take a more clandestine form, and that means like the spreading of outright lies about people, like you mentioned this in whispering campaigns,
Hmm.
and not always over disagreements about 9/11, which you see a lot of, but it can be from people seeking personal gain too, right, which is a form of bullying, and lies can be incredibly harmful. And, we are a truth movement, and, truth is all about honesty. And just in a hypothetical situation, if a 9/11 truth leader spread false accusations about others for personal gain or used deception to advance their own personal interest in any way, should they still be regarded as a quote truth leader? And who speaks for the people harmed by those actions? And wouldn't the movement deserve to know the truth if those deceptions are being spread?
Are you asking me, Andy?
Yeah, I'm asking you because that'd be a form of bullying if you're going out and
Yeah.
spreading lies about other people for personal gain or whatever, and that would be a form of bullying. So, I mean, shouldn't that be stood up against and
Well,
exposed?
yes, of course. But, it wouldn't be up to me to say whether someone should be a leader in the truth movement or not. I mean, I have no power to do that. But I would, if I felt someone was abusing their power, or spreading lies or whatever, then I feel like to live with myself, I must talk to that person, and I would talk to that person privately, hoping to reach them at a deeper level and show them we're not creating a better world by doing that. That's how people in our world operate all the time, and we're not creating a better world by doing that. So I would be hoping to reach that person at a deeper level by having a private conversation with him or her. That's what I would do.
What would you do? Because there's just those people out there, and they just don't care because they get away with something. You try to have that private conversation, but they don't want to have it, and they're not that motivated by what you say. So what do you do in that situation when you see the lies that are continuing to harm the truth movement in this hypothetical scenario? Like, what do you do in a situation like that? They just don't care.
What would you do, Andy?
Well, I don't know. I've been kind of banging my, in this
Kind of listening to
scenario
all
I'm
this,
coming up
yeah.
with, the story that I'm writing here, and I'm just trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out the character's next move. So, like I just wanted to hear from you because you're covering the subject.
So state the question again, very
Well, I'm
succinctly.
just saying, like, if there's lies being spread against other members of the truth movement, especially those ones who have been effective, and the people have done it for personal gain, which is a form of bullying, and they're not really interested in having a conversation or
Mhm.
you know maybe there's a little bit of psychopathy going on there, or maybe they just misrepresent situations to make themselves sound more sympathetic or something. Like, what do you do? And doesn't the movement deserve to know truth, since it is a truth movement?
Well, I think if I were to see that going on with somebody, what I would, and I couldn't talk to that person individually, like I said, what I would try to do is write an open letter and
Mm,
explain to the movement uh, what I see going on. That I've tried to
mm,
talk to this person individually. I've tried to, communicate on a person-to-person level, but that the accusations, these are accusations that are not true. Here's why they're not true, and just deal with it the best I can that way. You can't control what other people are going to do, but you can at least, you know, try to make people aware of what is going on. I mean,
it's a difficult
that's the first thing
situation.
that comes to me, Andy.
It's a difficult situation. The Catholic Church hid sex abuse for years.
Right.
And I'm not saying that this is, anything, because they said it would be bad for the church. That was what they used to justify it.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think there's anything that bad going on in any, movements that I'm aware of. But, deceptions are still bad and everything. But, people still say, talking about this is just bad for the overall cause. So, you might get a negative reaction, but I want to thank you because it is courageous to speak up especially when you know certain things that other people don't. So,
It is courageous. You're right,
mhm.
Andy. I think some of us who are activists, we think of ourselves as being rebels. We're strong and we're going to go against authority, and it's like, but however, when it comes to speaking up in our own cohort, speaking up about something that we see that's not right that's going on, it's scary to do that because I mean, I've done it myself and I know how scary it is, and
Mhm.
we could be attacked and banished from the group. But I think we have to do whatever we need to do to keep our integrity intact. But we have to do it in a way that does keep our integrity intact.
Right, because truth is the most important thing.
And the way we do that is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, next we have Richard. Go ahead, Richard.
Uh, I wanted to share a little of my personal journey in confronting the challenge that people felt when you challenge their worldview with 9/11 truth, and it goes against some of their very fundamental preconceptions about reality. Uh, in my personal life, with my family and some friends, I was a loner, and I did have, however, some credibility as a researcher and an educated person in this circle of family and friends. And so I was not shy about saying what I thought about 9/11 from the very beginning. I knew the day that 9/11 happened that it was an inside job because I knew enough about explosives in previous government operations and building technology. Uh, so that didn't go down very well, and I never pushed it. I acknowledged that people felt differently, and that was okay. But I looked for opportunities to point out something when it kind of fit in a conversation. And slowly but surely, I made headway with my family and friends. And eventually, I converted a few of them completely, and that kind of helped take care of the others who were still uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But at least I was able to carve out a space where I could be real and still be accepted in my family and with some circle of friends and that with very, very little damage done. So that was a very long-term and slow process. And then I also am an activist in the nuclear disarmament movement and the anti-war movement. I have been all my life, and so I have a certain amount of credibility in local circles that way. And so that helped me do the same thing with mass peace action and with the left peace groups. In fact, we even were able, 9/11, Boston 9/11 Truth was even able to, we almost won a majority vote among all the left groups in a national left anti-war coalition, largely socialist and Trotskyist groups. We almost won a vote at a national convention regarding 9/11 by simply being a part of the activities and expressing our opinions. But we never got any farther than that. The leadership really cracked down after that and made sure we never again had a forum in their circle. And in the somewhat more liberal and I guess less socialist oriented group of mass peace action, because I'm an active and contributing member, I was able to do the same thing I did with my family. They all know that I'm part of Boston 9/11 Truth, and periodically, when appropriate, when in discussions about what's going on in a war or what might happen in a war, I interject things that seem appropriate, particularly regarding the likelihood or possibility of further false flag operations that the U.S. might undertake to start another conflict. And that I have suffered no damage whatsoever in those relationships or in my position in this organization, and am able to make slight headway. And I want to applaud the 9/11 Truth Group because I think that we have played a very important role in uh, in conveying and expanding the understanding that people have about the deep state, whatever that different people may think that is, and to the extent that now in the anti-war circles that I'm a part of, it's almost it's like a given that false flag operations happen all the time, and everybody's on the outlook for them, and especially suspicious of Israel for doing repeated false flag operations in the conflicts that it's engaged in
Richard,
order to gain support for its side.
I-
And I
Richard,
think we deserve a lot of the credit for spreading some of that understanding, at least in some circles in the country.
thank you, Richard. I'm happy that you brought these things up. I'm just wondering if you have a specific question or comment about bullying or harassment.
No?
Richard, I want to say I really I so agree with you. I know Marty Hopper and I a few years back we did a talk on false flag operations and
Yeah.
in Denver, and I was thinking one of the most important things we can do in this movement is get that concept into the minds of Americans, and indeed it is. You see the term false flag operation now not being made fun
Yeah.
of anymore. It's not made fun of anymore. It's part of our lexicon.
Yes.
Yeah, in America now. So thank you.
Mhm.
Excellent. So next we have Al.
Yeah, this is more as I was introduced to Boston 9/11, but I found that a lot of people that came uh, were more interested in hearing themselves talk, and it was very annoying to me. But I don't know how to handle a situation where um, they go on and don't stay on focus on the subject matter. And I just was looking for, the best solution to getting people to pay attention to what we're here for. And anyway, I'm not being, so that's just a comment that I have with people that come to groups and then they just go on and they're more interested in hearing themselves than really anything else. So I don't know if you have any advice for that.
Well, I would say, Al, that, just off the top of my head, that we talked a little bit about that, but people who really they don't know how to step back. They want to step forward and have their voice. They want to be heard a lot. They're hungry for attention. And to me, that takes your, just pointing out in the group. I know Marty did this in our group once, and I really remembered it. She said, now there's some people here who really like to talk, and I want people. I don't know exactly what she said, but we need to learn how to step back if we're good at addressing groups, and let other people step forward. And other people need to learn how to step forward and have their voice. So I think just making people aware of that, like Marty did in our group, is a very good thing to do. And then having certain time that people are talking. So they know they only have 2 minutes and, so whatever it is, but, I think group rules are helpful with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Craig, go ahead.
Yes, thanks very much. Hi, Fran.
Hi, Craig.
Hi there. I find the subject kind of a tricky one in some ways, especially in our movement, because if you like all the things you talked about, I think are very, if you're dealing with a situation where everybody is at least well-intentioned, then you can apply all of these, what's the word I'm looking for? Not tactics, but strategies, I guess, for dealing with people. But some of the people you're going to be dealing with are not authentic, and they have a purpose. Their purpose is to disrupt. It's not their personality. It's not anything to do with them. It's just that's what they are there to do. And so I would point out that some bullies are actually just they're putting on a performance, I guess, and that they're and that's where I find it becomes tricky, because when you call out behavior that may not even look bullying. I mean, most really bullying behavior I tend to ignore, and I've received a lot of it over the years, as a lot of other people have. But I find that when you try to make legitimate criticisms, sometimes you can end up being painted as the bully because you're raising legitimate points. And so I guess, people often, I think, judge the tone of the way the parties are interacting. And sometimes they make the assumption that the person that has the more aggressive tone must be the bad guy, and the person that's more polite must be the good guy. And I think sometimes that's true, and sometimes the reverse is true, I think. And sometimes maybe the level of aggression of calling out certain behavior is the result of the fact that nobody else is catching on to the points being made. Nobody else is willing to listen, I guess, to some of the concerns being raised. So I guess my question then, and And, it makes me think, just, thinking of, I think about my favorite movie director, Alfred Hitchcock, and how he used to talk about how when he had a villain, when he wanted to make a villain for one of his movies, he always found the charming ones to be the most interesting, not the, the ones that would, the more charming the villain was for him, the more compelling they were, and perhaps the more menacing. So I guess the question I would ask, and I might follow up depending on your answer, but I guess I'm curious, like, if, let's just say hypothetically, if one person A, let's say, believes that person B is spreading misinformation or even disinformation, and that person makes repeated attempts to demonstrate this to others using evidence, but that gets either ignored or deflected by the person being, I guess, criticized. What forms of criticism would you consider that person, would you consider acceptable for that person to use in order to call out what they feel is bad behavior?
Oh, so there's a lot in there to unpack, Craig.
Well, that's because of the time limit. So I'm trying to get it all. I'm trying to get as much bang for my buck as I can. I can
Right.
repeat that question a little more.
Yeah, repeat it a little more succinctly.
Okay. What I'm saying is, let's say you call out something, you feel somebody is not being genuine. You calling out maybe that you think they're misrepresenting facts or whatever, and so you call them out. If the person being criticized just simply doesn't engage with the criticism and doesn't react to it and doesn't defend their position, but just kind of ignores, then what type of criticism, like, where can someone who wants to make that criticism go without, perhaps without being called a bully for doing it?
Well, first of all, let's remember how I define bullying. It's behavior with the intent to intimidate, in other words, make people fearful, to control, or to damage others. So I think we may feel, you said feel, that someone is a bully, but maybe they're not a bully. Maybe, it could be that maybe you just don't agree with them. Maybe they don't agree with you. Maybe it's just a difference in perspectives, and it's a disagreement in what is reality. So if you feel that they're not being genuine, and you think you need to call them out, there you might look at why you have the reaction you do. Now look at yourself. Does it remind you of somebody you knew in your past? Is it are there's a difference in perception of reality. Are you able to talk with that person at the level of evidence, person to person, and talk together? These are just questions I have. There's not a specific answer here. It's just, if you feel someone is spreading disinformation, are they really? Can you have a discussion with that person one-on-one and discuss at the level of evidence? So that's the only thing that comes to me. Like,
Right.
There's not a set answer for your question. Depends on the situation.
Yeah, perhaps I shouldn't have used the word feel there, because I'm using it as sort of interchangeable with think, I guess, in that, if you strongly think that somebody is not, they're not being genuine, and you feel like you need to let other people know that, sometimes that can be perceived as you being the problem, not the person that you're calling out. So And what makes it difficult, I think, and we're talking in broad terms because we can't really get into specifics, but is sometimes when you don't get that engagement back, or the something you feel is incorrect is not addressed or not, then it can it sort of, you kind of look, well, where else does one go with this? If the other person's not willing to react, then
Well,
you
Craig,
yeah,
if I may,
sure.
if they don't react, it sounds like you got the last word, and that's kind of winning.
I agree with you. But I agree with you. But what happens if nobody else knows that that's the result?
How do you know that they don't know?
Well,
You're
right. Some of
can't
them
you just
know.
let it go? You got the last word in and just let it go?
It depends on what's at stake, I think. If you,
But if you hammer it, you start to lose your point.
Well, that's where it becomes tricky. Absolutely, that's where it becomes tricky because
it's not so tricky. You got the last word, and so there.
I wish it were that simple, but
Well, it is simple. It's just you don't want to let it go.
Well, it may. Okay, I was going to just bow out here, but I will just quickly comment, if you don't mind. It's not just a question in my mind of letting it go. If the movement, let's say hypothetically, let's say it is making a decision kind of by consensus to ignore a piece of important evidence.
I see where you're going.
And you're trying to sort of raise the alarm bell, like, we can't do this. This is important. Mm-hmm. And nobody notices that you may have won that point. It may feel good to have won the point, but you may not achieve the what you're trying to achieve in keeping that evidence from being disqualified.
Well, what you do at that point is just hammer how important the evidence is, not hammer the point that you went out with before, but how important the point is.
Right. Okay. Well, that's pretty reasonable.
And do introspection. Every one of us have to do that. What does it mean if we want people to believe what we believe, and you're finding some people aren't believing what you believe? What kind of emotion do I feel when that happens?
Right.
What happens if not everybody sees that I'm right?
Right.
So do introspection, and get clear on yourself, and that can help you, I think, with how to proceed. That's one thing that comes to me, Craig. I mean, I'm here learning with all of you, and I did my reading on this and thinking about my own experiences of bullying in my past, and what happened when I called it out, and how I succeeded in calling it out and got people to stop bullying, and how I felt so good about that. I mean, I felt good. I'm in my integrity when I did that. When I didn't call it out, and I feel bad to this day about it. To this day, I feel bad about it. When I saw a young man get bullying in middle school. He was handicapped, very handicapped, and all the terrible young men in that middle school were just treating him horribly, and because they couldn't stand to see someone who looked weak, and I didn't do anything. I was scared to do anything. To this day, I remember that, and I don't feel good about it. In another situation, it was in 6th grade. I happened to be always captain of the team when recess because I was very athletic. And there's this one girl came into our class, new. She was from a farm family, and she was big, and she had rough hands. And all the girls started yelling, "Cooties, cooties," and wouldn't let her play the game. Since I was always the captain, because I was good at dodgeball and all these other things we did. I just went over to her and I said, I choose you to be on my team, and grabbed her hand, and no one bullied her again after that. I feel really good about that, you know.
That's an
Now,
awesome story, Fran.
yeah, and there's other times I feel really bad when I didn't step up to the plate. So anyway, I think we should move on, but
Yep.
I think we just need to do introspection, Craig, about what emotions come up for us if we don't get people to believe the way we believe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Richard, you're next. Richard Gage.
I'm not going to be so subtle. We have another situation in the 9/11 truth movement, and that is a degree of bullying from the DEW crowd that's just increasingly uncomfortable and attacked. I mean, I'm personally attacked, maybe more than others, because I'm seen as a gatekeeper on that issue. And more and more in different forums, and I know Boston has to deal with this quite a bit, they've been more open about allowing some of these voices. The 9/11 War Room has attempted to keep it to a minimum. The biggest bullying comes from outside those circles, but toward those circles and myself. And so the question really is, these are not people that are in my circles. So, and I've chosen to not allow them to be, and probably vice versa. But when they have, when we have intersected, it's been almost violent at times, verbally, written. So the question really is, and I'm keying off from Brian's comment in the chat, who said that he doesn't apologize for bullying the debunkers that are putting out lies. And I think I would be less aggressive than that in my case, but I do feel some aggression, some force is warranted here, because they're very aggressively trying to take over the narrative in the 9/11 truth movement, and for instance spamming Ron Johnson with their stuff. So I guess I'm feeling defensive, and I should do some introspection there too as well. But anyway, I wanted to ask you for your and Marty's thoughts on this subject.
Very good.
It's a really tough situation, Richard. Well, the first thing that came to me, Richard, is by not inviting them into your group, you've done one thing we can do. I mean, as I was talking to Marty about this and cogitating about what we do about people who are truly bullies or just really difficult to, is I said, I don't invite bullies to my parties. And I also don't go to their parties. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't like your behavior, and I find your behavior intimidating, and you're not invited to my party. So that's one thing that comes to me. I think you've done the right thing by not, if you find them intimidating, just not invite them. They have the opportunity to state their case with evidence and if and to state why they believe the way they believe and give evidence for it. And if that evidence has been debunked already, then they need to be reminded of that, and said, we can't tolerate this anymore. Those are the things that come to me, Richard. I would like other people to speak to that too, because I know it's a difficult situation you're in.
Well, at Boston 9/11 Truth, we have members in our group that are very supportive of our activities, and they don't go off script when we go out with flyers and what have you, but they're DEW people. And not a lot of them, but a few, And so our rule basically is if you abide by our guidelines and not, interrupt people or monopolize the stage, and if you, stick with our literature that we hand out, you're welcome. You're welcome to our group. That's the way we handle it. And I did have my hand raised, but Zoom keeps lowering it every time I speak because I'm the host. So, I would like to take my turn for my question next, if you'd like to respond to Richard further or what I said.
Could I respond to Richard?
Please, yes.
Richard, and it's the reason I raised my hand. I think what Richard's raising and what Craig and Andy. So one thing, when we talk about bullying, we're talking about it at really an interpersonal level. And so what is different to me is I feel, and a reason I didn't jump on Susan's invitation to present, I feel this is very complex when we are talking about the level of a global movement. So what are the strategies to deal with bullying when, we're all over the world. We've got millions of people. We have so many different groups. Yes, at some level, it boils down to people interpersonally attacking Richard or Craig or Andy or Fran, whomever it is, but yet they can just disappear and click the button and they're gone. So I think this is very complex, honestly, of how do you deal with this kind of differences and attacks and all the strategy, whether the person, is ignoring us or attacking. I don't have an answer. I am just saying I think this is a more complex than I'm in the workplace in a meeting and I tell the person they're interrupting me. Okay, we can kind of do that on Zoom, but I think it gets difficult. I liked, Fran, your suggestion of writing something, because people often who can't deal with something interpersonally will read it. I've dealt with people like that. They won't hear my feedback, but if I write it, they'll read it. I know they're going to read it. But again, if I'm in the movement, I need a forum to do that. So I may not have a forum. Richard has a forum to do that. Craig has a forum. You have a forum for it. So not everyone does. So my only point is I do want to acknowledge, I feel the complexity of this issue when we're talking about a global movement with millions of people in it. So that's it.
Very good. All right, I'm going to take my turn. I have two questions, if that's all right. Fran, you talked about being the hero, or what was it?
The rescuer. Yeah.
The rescuer.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you talked about standing up to somebody bullying somebody else.
Right.
So how do you distinguish between standing up for somebody else and not being the rescuer? Or should we be the rescuer?
Well, it's when I'm talking about don't play the rescuer, it's in the context of the Cartman drama triangle,
I put
K-A-R-T.
that in the chat, that link.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's
I haven't read it yet.
you can even just put it in the search engine and AI will bring you all sorts of information about it. But it's actually a dysfunctional thing. It's someone trying to be the hero and they're going to come and rescue this poor victim. What they should be doing is getting the victim, to the person who's playing the victim, is getting that person to find their own agency, to find their own power, to find out what they can do. So if they are being persecuted, what they can do about that, It's also, if you do see someone being, I also feel if you do see someone that is being, what can I say, uh, 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 attacked, especially if it's repeatedly, then I can't just sit by
Right.
and let that happen. As a human being, I need to point out the behavior of the person who's attacking and bullying. I have to do that. Otherwise, like I said, if I don't do that, I don't feel good about myself. I can't live with myself. I have to at least point it out. Hey, you're abusing that person, and here's how you're abusing that person. But then let the person who's being abused, that can break the conformity in the group. Just one person speaking up and saying, I see this behavior going on, then that alerts other people to start seeing the behavior too. And but it doesn't mean I'm rushing in, oh, you poor thing, I'm going to save you. It's not like that.
Mm.
And in the Cartman, one of the very interesting things in the Cartman drama triangle, the person who runs to jump into the victim position all the time, can often be the person that turns around and becomes the persecutor in the next minute. It's a very interesting dynamic and it's very dysfunctional.
I'll definitely have to read that article. Thank you.
Yeah, read about it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is fascinating. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Anyway, that's as
So
best
I
I can
did
add.
have a second question, if that's all right.
Sure.
Joshua, sorry to make you wait. So what Marty mentioned, it's a very complex issue. I do think when we're talking about 9/11 truth, it is more complex, not as simple as high school bullying, because what we're dealing with is calling out the government and the media and all their lies. Okay, we're dealing on a global stage. And naturally, we can expect disinfo infiltrators.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first reflex we have is to call those disinfo infiltrators out. But we could be wrong. It could be a personality disorder, it could be something else, not an infiltrator. So, it's not up to us to be judge, jury, and executor as to decide who the infiltrator is, although we really want to, because the stakes are so high. Now, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but the way I deal with it is, hey, so what if they're an infiltrator? We can call out the actions. We don't have to call out the person. We can call out the facts. We don't have to call out the person. Like I've had someone who believes in the official story as one of my guest speakers once. I have no qualms about that. Let them speak. Let's call them out with the evidence. We don't need to attack the person. Do you think that's probably a pretty good strategy, or should we be soldiers in arms and combat the people that we think are infiltrators, or just stick with the facts?
Marty, did you want to say something about that?
Well, an infiltrator, that's a different level than I think back to, Fran's example from the movement of the infiltrators who really damaged the group, back in 2000. Then that's different. Then I think you do have where you are having someone who is damaging even people in your group, and it's at that group level, you probably can. And back, Fran, your point of, you have a group, you can invite people or disinvite people. I think if you think someone is truly an infiltrator and you are running a group like you are, Susan, then you do have a choice to not, like, invite them to your party, so to speak. I think if they're doing damage and it boils down to your and your group's opinion.
If they're doing damage, then you call out the behavior.
Right,
You really
right.
need to call them out personally. You call
And
out the behavior.
Yeah, I really agree with you, everything you said, Susan. You call out their behavior, you know, and you call out the facts, you know. There will be infiltration. I cannot imagine there not being infiltration in the 9/11 Truth Movement. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Of course there is, you
Of
know.
course.
Of course it is. There's an article I actually got years ago from Kevin Ryan that research, I think it was by the ACLU, it said that in most of the peace and justice groups, there were 6% infiltrators. I mean, this was a study that was done that found that 6% of the people were actual infiltrators and probably COINTELPRO, and they had risen in one case someone who's running for office in the Green Party. They had risen to the second position in that party.
Wow.
So just think, if there's 6% in these other peace and justice groups, you can imagine, of course, there's going to be at least 6% in the 9/11 Truth Movement. Now, how do you know? How do you know someone's an infiltrator? On the one hand, we just have to be aware that that's a part of our reality here in this country. And also, so on the one hand, we realize that's a reality. On the other hand, um, so you're right. So call out the behavior. That's it. But on the other hand, I'm reminded of Madhava's talk at the Boston group, which he said something that I agree with wholeheartedly, which is there's very little we can really know in life. We have many beliefs, you know, but there's very little we can really know. And how I add on to that is how can we become more clear about our beliefs? How can we become more certain about our beliefs? Well, it's by doing the research, looking at the facts, you know, looking at the facts. And at some point, you may decide to say, I'm pretty certain about this belief of mine. All the evidence backs it up, you know. So, so on the other hand, it's a very, and what we're dealing with is an issue where we're trying to put together the pieces of the puzzle for what reality is here. And we'll never have all the pieces to this puzzle. We'll never have all the pieces because they are being hidden from us. So we have to do our very best to put together as confidently as we can with the pieces we have. And new pieces come along, we have to look at those new pieces, you know, and see how they fit into the puzzle, not disregard them, because we don't disregard those new pieces because they might be very key pieces to this puzzle we're trying to put together. And so we need to look at any new evidence that comes our way. That's what I consider being a truth seeker. And I think what I consider truth-seeking behavior is that we're very cognitively flexible. In other words, new evidence comes our way, we add that into the mix and we see how that changes the picture. So we don't just reject it because it goes against our belief, you know. So that's all I have to say about that. I think you're doing the right thing, Susan. Call out the behavior.
Thank you. Joshua, you're next.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Hey, so I just out of curiosity, would there be like a possible way that somebody with conflicting evidence could get their point across, especially on social media, without coming across as bullying in situations where, let's say, they're told, that kind of talk isn't welcome here, or, we don't want anything to do with that, good to go. I know that that can kind of raise emotion sometimes, and some people will end up, saying things that they don't mean to. But again, if this person genuinely believes, in the evidence that they have, how can they get their point across, especially when agreeing to disagree is not an option?
Are you asking me, Joshua? Or
I think so. You are my
anybody?
or Susan,
Okay.
whoever.
All right, anybody, but I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but um, you're must be feeling frustrated because you like to get your opinion about what reality is across to other people on social media. And how do you do that, even though it may not be maybe a majority opinion? Am I stating that correctly?
Sorry, I was unmuting. I don't know the answer, to be honest.
I mean,
I really don't.
am I stating your question correctly? That
You're
you
right.
want you feel like you're a minority and you're trying to get your opinion across on social media, right?
In this situation, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
yes.
I don't know. You're not knowing exactly what you're talking about. I think the main thing is the in our universe, it's evidence that tells us what reality is, you know. So can you produce your evidence on that social media and say, here's the evidence for my belief. Somebody prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that this is not real evidence. And that can open it up to worldviews. It says, here's my worldview. I believe this. And here's the evidence behind that worldview, you know, and then invite people who have a different worldview to to respond to you, you know. Maybe they'll respond with different evidence that you need to listen to, or then you respond with something that contradicts their evidence. But by the way, I like that whole idea of presenting things in terms of worldviews, because just using that term opens up people's minds that there's not just one reality in life, that people have different worldviews and they have reasons for having those worldviews. Um, I have found that it's very constructive to approach controversial subjects with that word. And an example I have is during COVID, one of my daughters took exactly the opposite had exactly the opposite belief. She believed COVID was horrible and that she had to take those vaccines, every one of them, and people had to wear their mask, you know. And so I went into her house. I was in her house and I didn't have a wet mask and I wasn't vaccinated. So she said, Fran, would you mask up? You're not vaccinated. And I said, no. So, hey, she's my daughter. So, and she said, you won't? I said, no. I said, well, why? I said, Holly, let's go outside and share our worldviews about the vaccines, you know? And just using that word worldviews opened her up to listening to me. We went outside. I said, you share first, Holly. You share your worldview, why you think the vaccines are so great and why people should wear masks. So she did. I really, really listened. I really listened to her, and then I fed back to her beliefs, so she felt really heard. I said, "Did I get it right?" And she said, "Yeah, you got it totally right. That's my world. That's my worldview. That's how I feel." I said, "May I tell you my worldview now?" And she said, "Okay." And then I did. I told her the research that showed the masks don't work. She was shocked, And so, but we had a constructive conversation by using that term worldview. And there we were. The rest of her family was joining us, and they were looking on their phones when the first thing Google would get them about masks, but it turned into a very constructive conversation where she listened to me and I listened to her. And neither one of us changed our opinions, but we salvaged our relationship, and we introduced the whole concept that there are different worldviews here, and there's reasons for those different worldviews. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I would approach something like that. If you feel you're in a minority, here's my worldview and here's why I have it. Tell me your worldview.
No, I think that definitely resonates, for sure, and we also see that in a lot in politics these days, and a lot of us do like find ourselves having to disagree, on certain things, whether it's political beliefs, religious beliefs, or anything like that. But with like bigger events, and you see people who are going just like the worst time in their lives, and you want to do everything that you can to defend them, and when you genuinely believe certain things should be presented, again, maybe in like a worldview kind of way, yeah, I think that definitely matters. But also for people that believe that it is helping in a way, is it possible that the other side, who again is trying to shut it down, could be missing something as well, instead of just the other side missing something as far as evidence goes?
Of course, you know, so you just have to try to have a constructive conversation, and social media is probably the worst place in the world to have a constructive conversation.
Agreed.
So it's part of our reality.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
I feel for you though. You're in a tough situation.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua.
All right. I think we'll do this for 5 more minutes. So we have 3 more hands raised. I think we can do that. We'll see. But Richard, you've already raised your hand, and John Olson hasn't had a chance to speak, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to give John a chance. Go ahead.
You mean Joseph Olson?
Joseph
Yeah, okay.
Olson. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I've been a self-employed professional engineer in civil, mechanical, and electrical since 1983. I've worked in hundreds of multi-story buildings in 20 different states. I knew at the time that the South 22 degree popped back up and fell in 14 seconds, that it was controlled, but didn't know how. And as an engineer, I have a professional responsibility to not speculate. So I didn't make any public statements until I did an enormous amount of research. And the first bit of big research was going to the A&E 9/11 Truth DVD premiere in Austin, 2009. I got there an hour early. I reviewed all the New York City stamped approved drawings for the Trade Center buildings. I watched the videos. I listened to the presentation by Richard and by Alex Jones. Stayed and had some discussion afterwards. Then Richard did 2-hour DVD presentations in Houston. I attended both of those. We went to dinner afterwards, one at Pico's Mexican restaurant, another one at Los Tios. Then I went to a 3-hour event with Richard up in Austin at the Oriental Gardens, and I invited him to be a guest on TNT Radio when I was a host. We did a 2-hour Saturday program. He agreed to do the first hour. I was so polite during the first hour that he agreed to do an extra 30 minutes, and I didn't make any critical statement after he'd finished his in the last 30 minutes of the program. How I disagreed wholeheartedly about thermite, and he does not understand chemistry, physics, or structural engineering, had plenty of opportunity to engage on that, and he just refuses to. And I just consider that to be passive aggressive bullying. He doesn't understand what I'm saying, so therefore he's just going to not address me at all, even though I've gone
Joseph,
out of my way. Okay, go
Joseph,
ahead.
we had said that at the
Yes.
beginning, we were not going to mention names and start accusing people on a
Well,
personal level. So
well,
you
he said
said the same thing without saying who. That is not within the guidelines. So if we can, Fran, I would like to give Fran a chance to respond to the behavior that you addressed, not the person. Fran, would you like to respond or no?
Free to respond to Joseph?
Yeah, but not about the people, the personalities he
Right.
mentioned.
Not right. So Joseph, I don't know if you were here at the beginning when we made that rule, but hopefully you at least you know now. We had a very strict rule of not naming anyone. So I don't know what to say. I don't know the situation, Joseph. Um, I think if you couldn't get a certain person to listen to you and listen to you're a civil engineer, so you must know some things about controlled demolition, and you want someone to hear you and they're not hearing you. So could you then find someone else who could hear you and could say, look at your evidence and say yes or no? Means test it out with someone else who is also a civil engineer, perhaps, that's what I would suggest. Don't focus on one person and how they were bad in some way because they didn't hear you out, but go find somebody else and get their opinion on your evidence. And then go to another person, get their opinion. And in other words, look for what the truth is. You may be right, you may not be right. We don't know, you know. So that's what I would suggest, Joseph, is instead of demonizing anybody for not listening to you, go find somebody else and see if you can get people to agree with you or show you why you're wrong or not, you know.
Thank you. Well, we're at 6:30. Does anybody object if we take the last two questions and go over? I mean, it's 8:30, not 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. I'd like to keep it to short questions though, and
Okay.
not.
All right. Richard Kreshnik, go ahead. You're muted.
I don't have a question. I wanted to make an observation about the DEW issue, if that's okay.
Well, does it relate to bullying and harassment, which is the topic of tonight's show?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
As Susan mentioned, we have some DEW people in our Boston 9/11 Truth Group, and one of them is the most persistent and eloquent proponents and puts forth evidence consistently and is not a bully, doesn't bully anybody with it. And I was very skeptical to start with because I knew nothing really about DEW. And I was very dug deep into the evidence of controlled demolition and nanothermite and thermite and so on. And but I listened, and I was eventually convinced that DEW was a part of 9/11. But I came to the tentative conclusion that it was not a major part of what happened on 9/11. It was more of an experimental part of what happened on 9/11. It was a sort of an introduction of DEW into such phenomena. And I continue to dialogue with this proponent of DEW, and we have a terrific relationship, very mutually specific, supportive relationship in our takes on this. And I was convinced by the evidence I saw that there was DEW damage scattered around in Lower Manhattan. I was convinced that one part of the building, the last to fall of one of the towers, was brought down by DEW. So I found it, I found that I could have an open mind and listen and learn something and draw my own conclusions about the extent to which it was correct. But the reason that worked out so well in our case was because nobody was bullying anybody on either side. So it doesn't really speak to, I guess, what Richard Gage is experiencing, if that really is bullying. If Richard is completely opposed or whatever to any role of DEW, I would suggest that he should take another look at it.
Well, thank you
Right.
for that. Did you have any comments?
We slipped over the line there, but
Yeah.
Poor Richard. You've been fair game here, even with our rule.
Well, I think it is very pertinent because it is clear that there are a lot of bullies in the DEW crowd, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean all of them are bullies. And that it goes to show you that the bullying behavior is counterproductive. You know, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
The more you bully, the worse you're making for your case. So, Craig, did you have more to say about that, Fran?
No, not really.
Okay. Craig, if you can take the last question and go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm glad that you guys got into the infiltration thing a little bit after my turn, and because I think that is something that has to be considered, that there could be ulterior motives involved sometimes. But I wanted just to quickly address this idea of, and I hear this from the same kind of selected number of people, I guess, that are very uncomfortable with kind of holding people to account, perhaps. But the idea of just deal with the facts, deal with the, don't deal with the person, deal with the behavior or something like that. That sounds good on the surface, but I think I feel there are some limitations to that, in the sense that sometimes you are noting a pattern of, perhaps in some case, a pattern of deception or a pattern of some kind of behavior that it seems to have a strategy to it. And I'm speaking very generally, not about anything specific. And so to not mention the person, how do you really shed any light on your concern about a particular pattern if you are unable to even mention the name of the person? And so I guess and so I would say that, and then the other comment I would throw in is that this is one of the things that frustrates me, is that when there are things that I think we should hold each other to account to a degree, when we're making statements in terms of evidence, I'm okay with being challenged. If I'm saying something that can be shot down, I'm fine with someone attempting to do that. What I find a little frustrating is that sometimes when that people are so concerned about everybody getting along that they hesitate to even challenge statements that may be problematic. So those statements end up perhaps, having a negative effect on the whole cause, because they aren't, the person saying them is not being challenged on them. So there's two things. I don't know if you remember the first thing now that I went so long on the second thing there, but so I'd love comments on the facts versus people. I mean, that my concern about how you can actually do that would be something I'd love to hear about.
Well, let me try to state those two questions, Craig, more succinctly. You're talking about facts and behavior. That's all great, but it looks great on the surface. But you think there may be patterns of deception, and how do we call out if we can't name people? How can we call that out? Okay,
Yes.
so well, again, I get whether you feel or you think, Craig.
Well, I mean think. I mean
Okay.
think.
Whether you think that people are deceptive or not, you could be right, you could be wrong. So how do we determine what reality is in our universe? This universe we live in, in my opinion, there are many ways, but evidence really takes the cake. For in our universe, evidence takes the cake for determining what reality is.
Yes.
How do we get beyond our human need to break through our own beliefs, our own need to be right? Oh gosh, I have to tell you this. This is a funny thing. I learned this from Lori Manuel, who's a PhD psychologist now. And in one of her early talks, she said, one of her professors said, you can sum up human behavior with these three things. People like to be liked, they like to be right, and they like to be free, in that order. So most people really, unless they're true psychopaths, they really like to be liked, And also, most people really, really like to be right, And most people will give up being free if they can get the other two, But when we're talking about here about holding people accountable, that's having the freedom to speak up despite our fear, to speak up and say, I see behavior there that is not good, that is not constructive, and I can't live with myself if I don't speak up for that, So the only thing I can say is you may think a person is being deceptive, but are they? How do you figure that out? I still say go to the evidence.
I agree.
Discuss the evidence and present your case. Some people may agree with you, some people may not agree with you, but don't go to criticizing the person or accusing them of being deceptive. We don't know.
Sometimes we have a pretty good idea, because if you're able to show somebody something pretty conclusively where it's not really a question of opinion, and someone else continues to deny it, even though it's sort of right in front of everybody's noses, at some point you can know reality. Not about everything, but you can know certain points.
The evidence is what can sort the wheat from the chaff.
I agree.
So I'd say stick to the evidence.
Yep.
That's all I can say. That's all I have.
Okay.
And I come here to you all in Boston. I'm not coming as an expert. I haven't studied this. I studied this enough to give this talk, and using, what the literature says, but as well as my own experiences. And I come here to learn myself. I'm learning from all of you, so that's how I come here. I'm learning with you all. What do we do to prevent our activist organizations from becoming dysfunctional. And I think we have to really, if we see actual bullying, or people who are disruptive because they're just difficult, they have difficult behavior, we do have to kindly call it out, calmly call it out, you know.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we have one more question from Jane. Is that okay?
Yes, I was just going to say that. Sweet.
I would love to hear from Jane.
Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you, Francis. I don't really have a question. I just simply want to express how much I appreciate this discussion with all of its nuance and sensitivity and humility. I don't know. I think it's much needed, and hopefully it will help to, expand the effectiveness of our efforts to bring this truth further to light. That's really, I just feel the need to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jane. To tack on to that, I would say often what I've said to people is I may look like an activist, but I'm really not. I'm not an activist. I'm really a person interested in psychospiritual growth. And I really feel that's what we're all doing here. We may look like activists, but we're just thrown in this arena together to be challenged by each other and to do introspection and to grow.
That really pervaded the field tonight.
Yeah, we're here for soul
so
growth.
much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane.
Well, thank you, everybody, and especially Fran and Marty. I think this was a much needed conversation, and actually leads into next week's speaker. We're going to have Paul De Lorius, who, besides his work in Lahaina, he's also a Boston 9/11 truther, but beyond that and before that, he was a community organizer, helping activist groups stay organized and stay focused. So that's going to be the topic of conversation next Thursday, which very much leads into what we've been talking about tonight, how to stay a vital and effective group. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all next week as well. And I so much appreciate everyone here. I think it was a very productive conversation.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, everybody. I've learned a lot by doing this, so thank you.
I think we all did. We all did learn a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
All right. Good night.
Thank you, Susan.
Good night.